Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking. Titanic, Sinclair. Welcome all. It's been a very, very interesting week to add onto a very interesting year. Thank you to everyone for the messages regarding the snowstorm that happened down here in Texas. Everything's all good and safe. Though it was a few days without power and water. That was interesting. It kind of reminded me of being on tour a little bit. You had to really plan for when batteries could be charged or when you could conveniently use the restroom. That was challenging at times. But a very, very bizarre week and a strange time to have recently moved to the great state of Texas, because as I've heard, it was over 100 years. Yeah, about over 100 years since it's been that cold or received that much snow, which I think a little bit was somewhat overblown because growing up where it'd be very common to have several feet of snow every year. Seeing 6 or 7 inches was a little bit silly to me, but understandable because we're just not prepped for that kind of thing down here. So it was intriguing, and there's a certain romance actually to spending the evening in candlelight and kind of scrounging around and finding activities and things to do, ways to make music. That was kind of my focus. I want to say thanks again to the great people over at Roland who make fine synthesizers and musical instruments and devices. And they had provided me with a couple of synthesizers and drum machines that were all battery powered, as well as this cool little mixer that's made for a phone. And I hadn't really had the opportunity. Well, on tour I would bring some of the battery powered, or they're also USB powered synthesizers to play on stage, simply because, well, they sound good, but the form factor, they're much smaller than a usual giant keyboard, and having to set those big keyboards up every day is a little bit of a hassle, more of a hassle than it should be. And so they've really made that very convenient with those boutique series synthesizers and drum machines. So big thank you to them. So that put a bit of an interruption into the normalcy, or what you would consider normal, modern normalcy, you could say. But we were able to successfully release my new song and music video for a song called We Danced All Night that I've been itching for several months now to release. It's one of my favorites from the new album. It's a nice, every song on this album I've written on acoustic guitar. Yeah, every single one started off on acoustic guitar. And that's kind of when I'm songwriting, that's kind of my my bare minimum. Especially recently, can I play the song with only a piano or only an acoustic guitar and sing it and still communicate the same idea and the same feeling as the fully recorded, produced version? And so I wrote We Dance All Night. I probably wrote that one about 3 or 4 months ago, and it's been one of my favorites for the new album. Altogether, I've written about 22 or 23 songs, and I've narrowed it down to about 11 or 12 I thought the album was done, or at least done being written. I'm still just putting kind of like the last little finishing touches on it with my production partner, Johnny Danger, who is the best ever. Recently, I wrote another one really out of the blue. It ended up being one of my favorites, I think because of the honesty in it. This album's really, it's fun. It's, I guess you might say, an emotional roller coaster because it's half very, very real, very honest, not sappy, but heartfelt. And then the other half is definitely heartfelt, but there's it's fun. It's very playful. It's the most playful thing I've ever done musically. I think that's a result of working with Johnny. He's such a friendly and just incredible person. And on my solo work, I've never collaborated, really. Everything from mixing and recording, production, every instrument, everything's always just been me. And so it's nice to have another creative person that I trust very much, who I can present these songs to, usually as just like a voice memo on my phone. Typically, I'll send like a rough demo first of kind of the vibe. And he always has really, really cool production notes and cool ideas. And that's something that I really learned to appreciate over the years, doing songwriting sessions and working with incredible producers, being very lucky to even get into the room with a lot of these producers. I really learned to appreciate and value collaboration. And it's different with everyone. And I think because my musical tastes and stylings and also production and mixing tastes are very in line with Johnny's. And so we did almost an entire extra album, which I think I'm probably going to end up releasing at some point. I'm just kind of hanging on to those songs, or maybe give them to another artist. I wrote those ones first, and it wasn't until we recorded one song in particular that would be what would become this new album, Texas Dream. And we knew right away. We were just laughing hysterically and dancing in his studio, and we kind of looked at each other and we're like, oh, this is the sound. And so I'm really excited to start dropping more consistently. I'd love to get to the point where I can do a song every month. That's kind of what I'm aiming for with a music video. And it's cool. It's a good, fun place to be in creatively, to have something that I'm extraordinarily proud of. For the first time in my life, I don't have really any reservations about putting it out there. I would always typically, at least with my solo music and recordings, there always was a certain feeling of, oh, it's not good enough. Or, I've scrapped a whole album, though the production was really wild and really cool sounds. I feel like the heart and soul wasn't quite there, and it was a long time. The last album I put out, I Have Teeth. What year was that? This is bad. I have to go online to see when my own. 2014. Different time of my life. Rowdy. Not sober. And just going through that whole Hollywood bad boy wannabe thing. But there is a special place in my heart for that album. I hadn't listened to any of my albums really in a long time. And recently I went through everything I've ever released, and it's certainly bittersweet doing that, because songs are like little time capsules. Whether you write them or listen to them, I'm sure you've probably, it just happened when I was driving earlier. A song came on and I was immediately zapped back to a time, and it's kind of cool when that happens. It can also be very painful, and in the case of I Have Teeth, it's mostly painful. But I'm glad that I actually recorded those and actually put them out, because I was not in a state of mind or a place to be thinking clearly at all, that's for sure. And now, as I'm more focused and certainly more experienced with songwriting, and having had the incredible pleasure of working with just amazing songwriters and producers, taking a whole year away from everything, just having an acoustic guitar and a notepad and a pen, and that's it, and coming up with so many songs, really loving all of them, and not feeling, I've never put out an album really that every single song I loved. There was always one or two where I thought they were just kind of like filler, or like, yeah, I guess this fits in there, but this one I'm very proud of. I think there's a little bit of something for everyone in there. And the song I was talking about earlier, once it's released, I'll get more into it, but I thought it might be something insightful to talk about today, just because the song's kind of new and fresh, and maybe in the future I'll look back at this video and see if I feel the same way. But I'd never really been able to put into words or musically, really, what it feels like to have crippling anxiety and depression. The song, at least to me, it's not a bummer. It's more of a reflection of it, and I think that maybe has to do with being a little bit older, hopefully a little bit more wiser. A little bit wiser. More wiser? A little bit wiser. Being able to reflect on it now that I think I have a little bit more of an understanding. And throughout the song, I just kind of go through several different, each verse is a different instance of key moments in my life where I remember the first times of it feeling really heavy. I don't think those things go away. I don't want to call them traumatic experiences, because I think my version of traumatic is probably a lot less severe than a lot of people in the world. So I don't want to make it sound like poor me, because I'm a lucky person. But still, I've had some experiences that were less than ideal, and those have stuck around with me. And so in the first verse, I kind of talk about one where I was very young, and then the next verse, kind of cool. The song doesn't have a chorus, but it feels very, it feels like a song. It's always cool when you can kind of do that, where even though you don't follow the traditional structure, verse, chorus, well, it depends on who you ask. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, or as I like to do, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, chorus, bridge, broken down chorus, big last chorus. Something along those lines seems to work. Or at least that in the type of music I like, those arrangements I think work really nice. But this one doesn't have a chorus, and it reads like a story. And it's kind of like chapters of, childhood, teenage years, just the first time I clearly remember having a full-blown panic attack. and getting into 20s and then late 20s. And now I think I'm happy with how that song turned out, because I used to really dwell on dealing with that. I know everyone handles it differently. I know a lot of people struggle with anxiety, depression, and all the things around it that manifest themselves. And just things in life that can kind of trigger your anxiety, which can then trigger a panic attack, which, it's like a cycle of trying to figure out what's going on in the head. And I found that music has really been one of the only things that have really helped. For a long time, I thought drugs and alcohol would do it, but that's just like it's like putting a Band-Aid over just a giant pool of water that's just spilling out, and the crack in the pool is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I wish it had taken me less time to understand that. But you gotta fall off the bike before you really know how to ride it. That's always kind of been my philosophy. And whatever it is, I think, I don't want to call it a coping mechanism, but whatever sort of help you can find, even if it's little tricks with breathing exercises or cognitive behavioral therapy or anything that can help you work through those anxious moments. I think it's wise to make note of them. And I've found that usually it's creating music, just getting my mind off of my own repetitive, irrational thoughts, and being able to look at them and remind myself, like, this is not a rational thought. And breathe. And there's way more, I guess, you could get into, but I'm not licensed or educated enough to really. I can just tell you what works for me, and it seems simple and maybe silly, but breathing and creating focusing on breathing. I know everyone has to breathe. But the creative process has been extremely, extremely helpful. And as I look back at the things that I have created, there's almost an irony to it, because had I not been through the anxious moments or the depressed moments, I never would have written all those songs and learned all the things with music production or video production over the years. It was almost like a form of escapism, but it got to a point where it became a profession. Then it became almost like a video game to me. I say video game with a caveat, because in the games that I've always loved, it's the challenge of them that makes them exciting and fun, and the challenge of like learning something new with cameras or lighting, microphones, music, little techniques, learning music itself, harmonies, and learning theory, which did not come natural to me. I know some people just can pick it up, but there's a certain amount of mathematics involved, and I never was a math person. But as I take the time to learn it, it really is like learning another language. I remember once I told my Japanese teacher, once it started to click where I could actually form sentences and at least order food and get my way around enough to survive in Japan. Enough. And I remember telling her, like, oh yeah, this is like just like learning music. And she just kind of looked at me like, She's the coolest. I just realized right now, I meant to put another light on. Sorry if this is bright. It's probably that's pink. Let me see here. I don't know if I can do that. I don't have my remote on with me. That kind of looks fun. Wow, it really adds to the 70s vibe, doesn't it? I got a haircut too. My girlfriend gave me a haircut, and I feel like I should be in like Boogie Nights or something now. But I like it. She did a really good job. I think that's what I was going for initially. Let's see. That's a little bit much, isn't it? Really needs to come down a bit. A little bit. Yeah, that's not too bad. Nice little hair light. Production value, 101. Hair light. I was noticing while editing one of these that because I have dark hair, it's nice to separate me from the background. And I thought, well, maybe let's try a hair light. And it wasn't until I just now when I realized it was not on. So we're learning together here. This is only episode 3 of this, so I'm sure there will be many more things to learn and things to experience. So it was a really fun exercise doing the music video for We Danced All Night, because it was really one of the first times I was very conscious of the cinematography and mostly the light. That's something, I know I talked about this a little bit before, but it's something that I'm really intrigued by as of late. And having the tools to shape light and play with light, and more importantly, having the time to do that, which over this past year, I've been really doing my best to learn. And a music video is a really great way to try a lot of things out. There were several setups in that one where I was able to try new techniques that I never really done on my own before, but I had seen on set before, and always wanted to see like if I could do it with a smaller amount of gear. That's been something also over the past year. That initial blow of everything shutting down, I mean, I remember the main studio I typically work out of, Soundstage, in Los Angeles. Maybe it was about a year ago. Well, right when everything closed down, they were one of the first ones to say like, "Hey, we're not even going to open till at least next summer," and it's looking like they're not even going to be opening up anytime soon. But there was something, because over the years, we tend to get like very accustomed to and comfortable, especially in our lines of work, like the tools that we think that we need to keep pushing forward and keep making better and better things. And so for me, I got really worried about, well, I've made all these videos that just look incredible, and it was scary to think. I thought for several months I wouldn't be able to really make anything that I was extremely proud of. But again, I was basing that all off of gear and being locked down. And I mean, even if, I mean, my friends who are typically booked nonstop, working on movies, music videos, TV shows, it's a real sticky situation trying to, I can't imagine making a TV show or a movie right now, at least that way, the old way. They're doing it all like in a bubble now, as they say. And as a director, I would find that extraordinarily frustrating. And so I feel like I saw the writing on the wall a little bit, and I was planning on leaving California already. So that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess. And it was cool because I reconnected after a couple months. There's that initial couple of weeks or maybe even a couple of months where just everyone was just locked down, and we would do our Zoom calls, and we would have our Zoom happy hour events with all the friends, which was it was very fun. But it's not the same. My close friends who also are in creative realms, either with music or making movies, we all kind of at the same time came to the point where we just needed to start making things again. And the conversation, and this is with people who are friends of mine, but maybe don't necessarily really know each other, but I found it very surprising that I kept hearing the same thing over and over, and saying the same thing over and over because it kept coming up of like, I feel like it kind of feels like being in high school again. Or just, it feels like how it used to feel, where we're just working with what we have. And that thing that I initially thought would be detrimental to the things that I was making ended up being kind of the cherry on top, I guess. One of the more exciting and thought-provoking and certainly humbling aspects of getting back to work with less. And that gets me really fired up, because it reminds me of when I was first starting out, and I had no money and I had to work jobs that I was not excited about, but every day as I watched the clock just waiting for the work shift to end, I would just think like, that's 1 second closer to getting a camera. That's 1 second closer. And then that all kind of compounds. And really a big part about the shift, I think, that happened for me this year on the creative side, and I guess this probably goes for music and making movies. It's just a huge reminder to get back to basics. And it would be very easy. I mean, for example, I directed a pilot, which is a single episode kind of test run. And that was like, I don't want to say how much, but it wasn't $1 million, but it wasn't $100,000. And that was just for one episode, and I couldn't believe it. And I think it was like a 6-day shoot, and it was just so much fun. And that ended up taking us to Sundance, which was incredible and bizarre and just a good time. For me, a dream come true. Ever since I was a young lad, I just thought it'd be so cool. I always heard about all my favorite directors and my favorite movies like premiering at Sundance. It's like, oh, maybe one day I'll do that. And that was a big goal of mine. And being able to premiere something there was just it still kind of doesn't make sense, really. And if I had a time machine, I would have, or if I ever have an opportunity to use more than one trip on a time machine, I would go back and like pat myself on the back, or maybe give myself a little shoulder rub and just be like, hey man, just like chill out. Don't freak out. Or don't be scared, I would say. Because it feels scary, but it's really not. At that time, I was still in that, I hadn't quite realized like everyone can win. And it's better when everyone wins. And everyone should have opportunities to share their creation. Because for me at that time, it was just like, I have to make sure my thing's the best thing, and that's just not the right idea. Because there were some really, really cool things that premiered, and I don't think I was able to enjoy as much as I should have. And my producers actually, at the time, but they'd been there before, and they were familiar with film festivals, and they knew like, hey, you have an opportunity to see like all these incredible things premiering. Anyway, so I apologize for the rant. I remember being on set shooting, and especially as a director, you're very spoiled in those situations where you pretty much, hey, can we try this? Yes. And I've produced enough things, at least, and at that point, where I knew like when the asks were too much, hey, can we have a helicopter shot here? I wouldn't do that kind of, well, I would do it just like as a joke, just to see my producers' faces and then just let them know like I'm just being silly, but but it's easy to get accustomed to the luxuries. And that's another one of those things. Even things as simple as like flying. Oh, this is kind of an interesting story, actually. Up until last March, because I was so used to living out of a suitcase, and especially when things were really rolling with tour, and whenever it wasn't tour, either it was heavy production on music or movie making, or it was like some event, because you have to do a lot of like press and a lot of these like festivals and all the fashion shows and stuff like that. And I always had a bag packed, no matter what, which had all like toiletries ready to go, socks and underwear, changes of clothes, just like backup things, and batteries charged. At any given time, I could get the call and, hey, you need to be wherever tomorrow. Grab the bag, no stress. Go to the airport, sleep on the plane, get to work, whatever the situation was. It got to the point where I would almost always have my passport on me. And I kind of want to do a whole separate video about that, because someone had asked me in a comment, either in one of these videos or somewhere recently, they asked, what's your most prized possession? And as far as like material things go, probably my passport, because it's a very quick for many reasons. It kind of like represents like my overcoming of my incredible fear of flying, and due to that anxiety, and it really represents like overcoming a lot of things that I was scared of, and having to have extra pages put in. I remember thinking that was so cool. Like that was like me getting like my suit of armor when they put the new pages in. They're like, "Hey, you've been traveling a lot. Cool." And just going through and seeing all of the stamps, and the cool thing about the passport is everything. The stamp always has a date, or if you have like a visa in there, there's even more information. It's like, oh yeah, that's why I went to that place. And but I'll do another episode kind of more about that at some point. But I legitimately would just always have my passport on me, because it started to feel almost like a lucky charm. And the point I wanted to get to was, I think I told myself when the lockdowns happened, I kind of, there's that optimist part of me, and then the pessimist part. And the optimist was like, it'll probably only be a couple weeks. And that's what they were saying too. I remember them saying, we're going to lock down for 2 weeks and this and that. But then the realist in me, especially knowing how like things work in the state of California, I was like, this is probably going to be a long, drawn out thing. And it's proving to be that. So after coming down to Texas and getting settled, and it was probably 4 or 5 months. And every time I opened the closet, there was my bag, and it was still packed. And every time I saw the bag, I would think, well, soon. I'll keep the bag packed. I'm probably going to need it. And I would think, the last trip that I went on with that bag would have been Hawaii with my girlfriend. We went, it was the month before the lockdowns hit, so we really got lucky there. And it was a beautiful, beautiful trip. So I definitely thank my lucky stars about that, because it was very much needed to get away. Anyone who's been to Hawaii knows of the incredible aloha vibe. But yeah, that was the last place that I went, and I had that bag packed for months and months and months, and finally, it feels like it was recently, but I guess it's been a couple months since then. And I thought, well, it's time to unpack the bag. And I thought that was kind of a cool metaphor for coming to terms with that type of change. I was certainly, and with other life-altering situations I've been in life, we hold on to, I don't really have a profound thing to say about that, other than like the resistance I had to letting go of being able to just leave whenever. And I think I had convinced myself that, you know what, if things get rough, it was like a sort of escapism. Well, I can always just leave. I can always just run away from it. And in this case, the whole world had shut down, and that wasn't going to happen. And I think for years to come, collectively, we're all gonna, and that's another big reason why I started making these videos, because I think collectively, as people who are constantly watching videos on our phones or on a computer, and we've all been pretty isolated. It's getting better, certainly, but there's like that reverberation that I'm very intrigued to see how we all come out of this. Hopefully better. I really hope so. To me, it seems like it. And I apologize if that comes across as like big-headed, because I'm just one person, one drop of water in the ocean, but I feel it. I feel like a sea change could happen. And hopefully that's something that happens sooner than later, because life is definitely more enjoyable without tension. I haven't started one of these videos yet with a plan. And I'm sure some people out there are probably commenting right now, we know. But I think the cat's out of the bag. In a lot of ways, at least when it comes to life being real. And as someone who made a career out of escapism and being as far from reality as I could be, at least. And don't get me wrong, I still, I just made a music video where I'm in love with a mannequin. I get it. The times where that's, at least for me, the times where the escape from reality and the need for running away from the truth seem to be, those time frames keep getting a little bit smaller, maybe. Could be wrong. I could just be thinking out loud here. I wanted to start ending these with a recommendation of either music or a book or a movie. And this week my pick would be, I'm not going to do like one particular album because it's totally up to you, but I've been listening to a considerable amount of Brian Eno. I was introduced to Brian Eno, well, I guess at first probably hearing like David Bowie, Talking Heads, and I probably heard Roxy music at some point when I was a kid. But the introduction I remember with the person that is Brian Eno was through a friend of mine who had the Oblique Strategies deck of cards. And if you're unfamiliar with Oblique Strategies, there's an app now, or there used to be an app, and basically it was a deck of cards that could get you out of creative blocks, roadblocks, or writer's block. And they all had these really quirky phrases on them, just really simple one-sentence things. It'll say, you'll pull one out if you're working on a song, for example, and you're just stuck. You're like, where do I go from here? Well, you refer to the Oblique Strategies, and you pull out a card and it'll say something like, do something boring. And then it's like, oh, cool. And, you go from there. I just thought that was such an interesting creative tool. And that got me, and then my friend who introduced me to that, because he had like the deck of cards, he got me into more of the ambient works. And that's big time. I mean, that had a huge influence. I mean, I've made, out of over 400 videos, original music for every single one of those, which was usually just me with a analog synthesizer and a bunch of reverb, or just making pleasant sounding polyphonic noises. I got into discrete music first, so maybe I would recommend that one. And this is a cool thing for anyone listening, because there are people who know way more about this than me, but I used to have the vinyl, and on the either in the sleeve or maybe on the back, somewhere in the artwork, it explained the concept of music being like a piece of furniture, which is pretty out there. Something along those lines. I was living in Chicago at the time, and I remember finding at a record store, I think it was just the first Brian Eno album I saw, and I was, I'll just get this one, not knowing really anything about it. And then anytime someone would come over to my loft at the time, I would just have it on. And it's amazing. That could be something to try out, or if you're unable to have people come over at this time, just put it on for yourself. And it's one of those things, like, you don't have to sit and listen to it, and it's not like background music, or as I've heard it referred to as like wallpaper music, or some people call it like laundromat music. It's not like that. It's more of an atmosphere, and it's a vibe it's good for, I would say, if you drink coffee or tea, like first thing in the morning, just let discrete music play and see how it affects your day, and then come back into the comments and let me know your thoughts, because it's brought a lot of joy to me, and so it'd be cool to see how other people feel about that. Someone also asked, when I was talking about the Bible, actually, they were asking what books in there I was into. Obviously the Gospels, but Psalms for sure, and particularly Psalm 88. And that could be something for... That one hit me, at least, as like... And of course, reading through it, that one like really spoke to me. And so, I Google it, and the first thing I see is something like, commonly referred to as like the saddest of all, and one of the saddest parts of the entire Bible. I'm like, of course. But maybe the first instance of emo music ever recorded, or one of. But there's a hopeful aspect to it as well. And depending on what translation you read, there are some discrepancies. And full disclosure, I've been reading the King James translation, but it'd be interesting too to hear other people's maybe interpretations about that, because I always saw the Psalms as little songs, and maybe that's why that book really spoke to me. I'm also rereading 1984. Pretty spooky. First time I read that, I was probably in high school, maybe 2004. And I remember at the time thinking, ooh, this is highly relevant. And I'm getting to the point now, after spending time on Clubhouse, getting to the point where I'm starting to think there are people who are using it as a blueprint. But those are just my opinions, and as I say, take them with a grain of salt. Well, I think that about does it for this week. Putting the final touches on the album, Texas Dream, this week. I'm very excited about it. If you haven't watched the new video for We Danced All Night, or heard the song, it's on Spotify and Apple Music and all those fun services. Maybe check it out. That'd be cool. It's helpful for me. I appreciate that very, very much. I had a lot of fun writing and recording that. I hope you like it. And thank you to everyone who's sent me nice messages and very kind words about it, because I feel really good about that one. And I think it's a nice, chronologically how I'm releasing these, I think it's a nice second step. And we're getting into the really fun ones coming up pretty soon, and lots of new music videos as well, which I'm incredibly excited about. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day or evening, and I hope you're all very well. I hope all my friends in the great state of Texas are enjoying their warm water and electricity again. And we'll see you next week. Peace and love.